Good evening, good evening. Good evening, good evening. My name is Ebony Fleming. I am the Director of Communications and Community Engagement for the City of Alexandria. We have many people joining this session, so we're going to give it a couple of seconds before we get started. Thank you all for joining. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all for joining us this evening for the City of Alexandria's Community Conversation. Tonight's subject is transportation. We have a pretty big team this evening, state and city partners, subject matter experts here to present valuable information as well as answer questions from our community. I'm going to introduce everyone, not in any particular order, so please don't take offense. I'm starting with city though. Director of Transportation and Environmental Services, Adriana Castañeda. We have Hillary Orr, Deputy Director of Transportation and Environmental Services. Our Division Chief for TEST, the same department, Ryan Knight. Nick Donahue, who is a Special Advisor to the Governor. Jennifer DeBrule, Director of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Kathy McGee, Deputy Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Transportation. Ben Manel, Assistant Director of Planning of the Virginia Department of Transportation. Aaron Hustis, Senior Project Manager for Kimley Horn. And Lucas Muller, Senior Project Manager for Kimley Horn. Last but not least, our City Manager, Jim Parajan. Thank you all very much for being here. I want to say right now, before we get into the presentation, we will be accepting questions live this evening. Due to our very limited time, every participant will have 30 seconds to ask the question of the panelist. We will have a team behind the scenes engaging with anybody who submits a question through the Q&A. So that is how you essentially get in line. Put a very high level question in the Q&A. It does not have to be the full question. Someone from behind the scenes will message you and let you know where you are in line and get you ready to ask your question. We want to make sure that you are aware that you do have to give us permission to unmute your mic. You will have to give us permission to unmute your mic following the presentation to ensure that you can keep your space in line. So thank you all very much. I'd like to pass it to Nick Donahue right now to begin.
Well, thanks so much, Ebony, and thank you all, everyone, for the opportunity to be with you here tonight. We do have a few short slides this evening. It's not going to be as many as we had the other evening because we look forward to answering and hearing some of your questions. But I did just want to quickly go through just a reminder of what was the study that the Commonwealth undertook. And so, Ebony, if we go to the next slide here. This slide, the study that the Commonwealth did is a planning level study. What we're really looking at is what are the impacts of the proposed development in the arena phase one? What are those transportation impacts? We try to use conservative approaches, so like looking at carpooling and other things of that nature and using lower assumptions than what was kind of found nationally. And then a lot of the transportation improvements that we identified in the analysis have a very healthy kind of contingency on them. So as those projects are further developed and go through the public engagement process, there is the ability to kind of address unforeseen things or things that come up along kind of through that way. But again, this is not a extremely like, here is the specific improvement, the exact number of square feet or things of that nature. This is what are the increased levels of traffic? Where are they moving from? What are those impacts? And what are potential improvements that could address those impacts? On the next slide, I want to also be very clear, like what this study does not do. So there's like some very, very important things that are going to continue to happen if this project moves forward here that I want to just note. So the first one I want to say is, as I mentioned earlier, this study does not replace any public engagement processes. that would happen for any proposed improvements in the future. So for any of you who've ever dealt with a VDOT, DRPT, or other transportation project in the future, or in the past, excuse me, you know that when we do those, we come out with very specific plans. We seek public engagement and feedback. Sometimes we've missed something or didn't think of something that the public helps us know about. We modify the plans as may be appropriate, and then we kind of, move forward with the project. All of that is still yet to happen for any of the projects that we talk about as we move forward in this presentation. I think it's really kind of important to understand. So those things still are to be fully refined and subject to kind of public input in the future. Secondly, this does not replace the process the city is going to be undertaking soon to evaluate the development's impact. So the city has a host of things that it's going to talk about during its portion of the slide deck. This study does not replace that. It does not supersede that. That is still going to happen and will take place in kind of the normal form and fashion to which it typically would. The last thing I'd say on this slide is just all of these improvements either require approval or coordination with the City of Alexandria, the County of Arlington, or WMATA. And so we are going to be working with those partners very closely over the coming years as these projects move forward. The last thing that I think is really important on the next slide is just what was the methodology that was used for this? And we use a pretty traditional methodology to look at the impacts of the proposed changes to the approved development here in the Potomac Yard area. So for the base case, if you will, which is kind of just what would happen if the arena project does not move forward or was not a potential, concept that we were looking at. What we analyzed was the locally approved development plans, as well as growth and regional background kind of traffic, which is just people moving through the area. That then kind of becomes the baseline scenario for how will traffic work in the future. And again, as the state, we always defer to local governments on their approved local land use. In this case, the city went through a very long process in the small area plan that was adopted for Potomac Yard back in 2017. And that plan with its amendments in 2019 is what is the basis for the analysis and the base case that the Commonwealth's analysis looked at. What we then did is said, okay, if instead of that proposed mix of residential, retail, and office, you have residential, retail, office, hotel, and arena, what are the unique and particular impacts on the transportation system by that change in growth? And as we talked about last time, we did see that there was an increase in peak trips, and we're going to talk again about what we mean when we say that compared to kind of the locally approved growth for that area, or the by right kind of growth that could happen because it's already been approved by the city. On the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to, I think, Kathy and Jen, who are going to walk through some of these proposed improvements. Before they jump in, I just want to say we estimate the projects will cost up to $215 million in upfront capital cost. There is a very, very healthy contingency, 50 to 60%, built into these figures. As I mentioned earlier, that's why you see that large range there. And then these improvements do have some additional ongoing operating costs associated with them, ranging from $2.5 million to about $7.5 million a year. And so with that, I'd love to turn it over to Jen DeBrule.
Thanks, Nick. We spent a good amount of our time focused on how we can really effectively move people through the area using transit, and looking at the metro system and what a beautiful and wonderful asset to the community that the Potomac Yard Metro Station is. How we can size additional service to meet event demand, to meet those peaks around big events that occur at the site. That additional service then helps us look at, what types of improvements would need to be made to the metro station to address those peak flows around event times. And we looked at things like additional fare gates and escalators, those pinch points where you would have people kind of walking through those more narrow corridors at the station. We also looked at the pedestrian walkways, the bridge over the railroad tracks, and the access to the North Pavilion to look at, how could we handle pedestrian traffic through those corridors. In addition to Metro, we looked at increased Metroway bus rapid transit service, and also increased service through the local dash system. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to talk about the roadway network.
Great, thank you. So As Nick said earlier, we took a planning level approach to this. So these improvements that I'm going to walk you through are those that we believe are important to keeping the traffic moving in the region, but they are by no means the final list. As the city goes through the rest of their process, improvements will be further refined. But at a high level, we looked at the interchange of I-395 southbound and Glebe Road. And we are adding a left turn lane there to facilitate traffic coming off of 395 onto Glebe Road. I'd like to point out that as we travel down Glebe Road, then there are a number of intersections that will also be improved. And in particular, I'll point out that West Glebe, South Glebe 4 Mile Run intersection, which has interesting geometry to it. And we will look at making sure that that intersection operates appropriately. We are also looking at improvements to Route 1 and Slater's Lane. That is the primary access point from the GW Parkway to the site. We have assumed 5% of the vehicles approaching the site from the south will use that route. So we show an additional right turn lane from Slater's Lane to Route 1 northbound. If you're familiar with that intersection, you know the geometry is tight. It comes in at Slater's, comes into Route 1 at an angle and right into the bridge. So we have been very conservative in our cost estimates there to make sure that we can facilitate the improvement that will be required there. There are 11 additional intersections where we are recommending improvements to accommodate turning volumes, as well as to optimize signal timing. And I'm going to pause here for just a moment and go into my engineer mode. So please forgive me if I go too deep. But one of the challenges to efficient signal timing at an intersection is making sure that we can run north and southbound lefts together and north and southbound throughs together to get the most use out of the green time available. A number of the intersections in this area currently run split phase, which means that the eastbound traffic goes and then the westbound traffic goes. And when you have heavy demand, that is not an efficient way to operate your signal. So a number of our improvements are geared towards adding the necessary turn lanes to separate turning traffic from through movements so that we can have more efficient signal timing and more efficient operations, which leads to increased throughput through the corridors that we're looking at. So at a high level, those are the improvements that we are recommending to accommodate the additional traffic. I think if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to keep going here. We have heard or seen a number of sort of high-level questions that I want to, we want to just take off the top here and spend a few minutes talking about. And then, as we open it up to more questions later this evening, hopefully we've answered a few right off the bat. So we've heard a number of questions about our selection of 5 to 6 p.m. as our analysis period. And there are a couple of things I'd like to say about that. 5 to 6 p.m. is identified as the peak hour in the PM time period in the North Potomac Yard Small Area Plan. So we wanted to be consistent with that. And as the peak hour, that is the hour of highest demand in this area. And so by layering our arena traffic, our arena traffic on top of that, we are again seeing the highest level of impacts and being conservative in our analysis. We carried that conservative approach throughout our assumptions. And so that's why we show a sellout crowd at the arena in terms of traffic generation. And we assume that 60% of the spectators coming to an event are coming during this 5 to 6 peak hour in the evenings. Again, if as well as things work in the 5 to 6 hour, then they will work even better if that if the crowd at a particular event is lower than 20,000 spectators. If they're coming in an hour other than 5 to 6, all of those impacts will be lower, and our improvements that work for 5 to 6 will work for those other hours as well. We've also had questions
So
about.
Kathy, if I could just kind of
Oh,
repeat
sorry.
what I heard you say there, because I think it's a really important thing that we got a lot of questions about during kind of the initial discussion here is it's not that we did not consider like the 6 to 7 hour, or, you know, we're not under the mistaken belief that rush hour is a single hour in Northern Virginia. We know it expands over several hours in the area. I'm a former resident, you know, we've all traveled there. What Kathy's saying here is we have looked at what is the hour with the greatest number of cars on the road, on the highway side. And then we also then looked at with that hour with the greatest number of cars, if 60% of the people who are traveling to the arena by car are on the road at that time, what are the impacts to the roadway? So as Ms. McGee was kind of saying, by looking at that, if we can then make the travel times during that hour, which is the hour with the greatest volumes there, work, we are confident and feel comfortable that the 6 to 7 hour should, you know, have comparable or faster travel times. Same thing with the 4 to 5 hour, with a Friday, with a Saturday. So I know another question was about like the number of home games. The 40 home game kind of figure is from those home games that happen on a weekday where we see the heaviest vehicle volumes. And with the kind of time overlapping, the start time, that is, excuse me, overlapping with the kind of the peak period there. So again, just really wanted to make sure we hit that one as much as we can, because we got a number of questions during kind of the first discussion about this plan with that. And with that, Kathy, I'm sorry, I will back away and hand it back to you.
That's quite all right. I appreciate the extra clarification and emphasis. Again, I think Nick has already answered the second question about the assumption around 40 home games. The 2023-2024 schedules indicate 40 home games between the two teams occurring Monday through Thursday. There are another 19 games that occur on Fridays, and the rest of the games then occur on weekends. Again, the assumption doesn't really impact our analysis other than to say it's these 40 home games that coincide with that PM peak period that we do anticipate to reflect what we show in our analysis, and everything else will have lower impacts. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben Manal for this third question about parking.
Thanks, Kathy. One of the other questions that we saw from the previous public meeting that focused on transportation was specifically with regard to parking available at the arena and site. In that presentation, I believe the number of 2,500 parking spaces that would be provided as part of the arena development was shared. We have had follow-up discussions with JBG Smith, who is the developer, as well as Monumental Enterprises, and they've indicated that JBG controls approximately 11,000 garage parking spaces within National Landing, and they are proposing arena satellite parking in a massive multi-level garage that sits under 5 office buildings, starting at 2451 Crystal Drive on the southern end and going all the way up to 20th Street in the north. And that multi-level garage contains approximately 3,800 parking spaces. And as of last week, they were looking at their weeknight 5 p.m. occupancy rate of about 10%. So there's about 90% of those spaces are open and available. So they're anticipating that they'll have a number of spaces available in those garages for use for the arena and the entertainment venue. And they will also be running shuttles from those as well. In addition to those, and Jen and Kathy can jump in here as they see fit, but we also identified as part of the study a number of metro accessible parking lots along the corridor, and that included Huntington, Hoffman Town Center Garage, Eisenhower Metro, Pentagon City Mall, as well as some others, and those total over 11,000 parking spaces. And Jennifer, I think you had the numbers on the latest occupancy rates for those?
Thanks, Ben. We've been monitoring occupancy of the parking garages across the metro system as part of our preparation for this. And really system-wide, Metro's parking garages are running at about 30% capacity, even during the peak period. So we feel like there's, a great likelihood, especially with the off-peak usage for potential arena people that are traveling via Metro to the arena, that there is capacity in those Metro garages to help support the parking in those facilities. And we've accounted for those trips in our analysis of the Metro station as well.
I believe we're back to you, Nick.
You are on mute.
My apologies there. So another question that was raised a lot during kind of the initial discussion is, well, how will these improvements be paid for? And so there's a few things I would like to kind of just say on that issue. The first is like, what is the structure and process for how those commitments will be made? And it's the Commonwealth's intent to use a process similar to what was used for Amazon HQ2 to put in place kind of a binding commitment that would be between the city, the county, the state, and the developer there, outlining the roles and responsibilities of each party with regard to the delivery of those transportation improvements. I personally feel it's been a successful model with Amazon HQ2, and we're hoping to replicate something similar here. And again, we've seen the Amazon HQ2 MOA go between administration transitions and things of that nature. And so we believe that, it's a successful model there. In terms of how will the 215 be paid, we are still working to identify 100% of those funds. We have identified 133 million of the 215, which was presented by Ms. McGee to the Commonwealth Transportation Board just earlier this week. And so the state will be using some funds that are currently on a project that is not advancing to construction for the next several years. And again, these dollars are in past fiscal years and the current fiscal year, and we'll be swapping funds on that project using the 133 in cash today to advance these transportation improvements here for the arena phase 1, and then holding the other project harmless by reserving a like amount of future Garvey bond proceeds, which is a type of financing instrument the General Assembly authorized the Commonwealth Transportation Board to use back in 2012, and of which there is sufficient capacity to hold that project harmless. Now, I know 133 is not 215. So, we still have more work to do, and we are hoping that we can answer the full $215 million question here within the next few weeks to kind of provide that information to lawmakers, the public, and reporters, as folks are very eager to understand where those funds will come from. Similarly, we are in ongoing discussions regarding the increase in additional operating costs that would be necessary for the increased WMATA rail service, as well as the increased Metroway bus and Dash bus service. I should note that with the operating costs, those all start several years out into the future. And so we're talking about, costs that would be incurred, several at 4 to 5 years from now, kind of depending on the advancement of construction. That being said, we do understand the importance of, working and to identify those funds and, providing the commitment to the community and others about how these things will be paid for. And so, Jen, I'd like to turn it over to you for the last question.
Thanks, Nick. I know we've heard a lot of concerns and we've heard a lot of questions about the broader conversation about WMATA funding. I think it's widely discussed in the media about WMATA's ongoing budget concerns. Certainly, the governor has been very clear that WMATA is an asset to the region. He has expressed his openness towards a short-term funding fix. He has met as recently as earlier this week, but has had 2 meetings with the leadership of WMATA, with their CEO, and also with their board chair, who is a resident of Alexandria. And we're confident that we're going to be able to get to a place where those broader funding needs are taken care of and not a concern for this conversation.
I would like to cut in before our Transportation and Environmental Services team begins their side of the presentation and just remind all attendees who want to ask a question, you must submit your question into the question and answer chat down below at the bottom of your screen. That is essentially how you will enter the line. That is how we will queue you up. So I wanted to just give everyone that reminder. And we will be in touch behind the scenes. We will message you directly when we are about to unmute your mic in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Adriana, I'd like to hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Ebony, and good evening, everyone. So tonight, the City of Alexandria Transportation and Environmental Services Department would like to take this opportunity to provide the community with an overview of what the community transportation plan process looks like once staff anticipates undertaking this process should the proposal advance to the next phase, which is important to note, as Nick mentioned, that this proposal will go through our standard development process, which is to actually submit an application to the city through our planning and zoning department. Next slide. There's a couple of things that we're going to be touching upon during our presentation, and we want to make sure that we go over what the plan development process looks like and what kind of topics and areas we're going to be talking about throughout this community transportation plan, because it is important to note that through the listening sessions, the town hall meetings, we have been hearing recurrent topics, and we want to make sure that the community understands that we hear you, and we will be including those topics as far as our community transportation plan. And we're also going to go over some future opportunities for more community input and feedback. And also, at the end, staff will go over what the timeline looks like. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hillary.
Okay. Thank you, Adriana. And thank you to the community for taking the time to learn more about this project. You know, we understand that the community is really concerned about transportation and traffic as it pertains to this proposal. And you've heard a lot from the state, but we also want to make sure that you're hearing from your city transportation team as well. We know that there's still a lot of work to do and a lot of questions to be answered. And tonight we want to share with you a potential path forward for figuring out how we can balance protecting our neighborhoods while also reaping the benefits that would come with this proposal. So as we do in Alexandria, we propose developing this community transportation plan that's designed to really dive into a lot of the ideas that are trying to kind of safeguard our community from traffic impacts when and if the arena becomes operational. The community has raised a lot of really great and very specific questions and concerns about the proposal. And our objective is to address them comprehensively through this plan, collaborating and engaging with the community throughout that process. So, you know, we don't have all of the answers yet. We're not going to have all the answers tonight, but we do have time to develop a plan to evaluate and assess ways to protect our neighborhoods. And that's really our intention. So at a very high level, this plan would be developed similarly to how we develop many of our planning efforts. So looking at best practices across the country and to other cities with similar event spaces, using the input and the ideas that we hear from you, our community, using the input from the state's transportation analysis and a lot of the ideas that have come out of that. And finally, using a more localized traffic study that would be required of the development once an application is submitted. And that's a really important thing that for us to talk about tonight. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to talk a little bit more about this last component.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. And as noted before, and you'll probably hear it a lot of times today, the development of the sites would be required to do a more detailed and localized multimodal transportation study that would verify and refine much of the information that the state study through the city's already established site plan review process. So although the state's study provided useful information to understand potential impacts and improvements to the transportation network from a higher level, it is not a replacement of what is required through the site plan review process. The more detailed and localized study will help us identify potential impacts to the network and recommend potential mitigation measures that not only result in an acceptable network operation, but adheres to the city's transportation vision and goals. The city is typically closely involved with the development of the study. We coordinate with the development team on the scope of the study, reviews the results and potential recommendations, and make comments if deemed appropriate. Throughout this process, the developer typically leads community engagement efforts in which the city is there to assist in addressing community concerns or providing additional insight. Now, again, as Hillary mentioned, we received a lot of questions from the community asking more details of the recommendation or recommended improvements and how it impacts the current network. Although we may not have all the answers today, more insight would be available if this project advances through the site plan review process and a more detailed study is complete. We want to use this study to understand what we think we need to make changes to our transportation network and also preserve and enhance elements of our network that not only are for cars or vehicles, but also other modes of transportation.
All right, thanks, Ryan. So now on this slide, I'd like to highlight some of the examples of the types of topics that we would be exploring should this proposal progress. So these topics are categorized into 4 main themes: neighborhood protection, transit, smart mobility, and roadway infrastructure. And it's important to note too that the bullet points provided here are just examples, and as the plan evolves, we would incorporate more specific subjects. So for example, under neighborhood protection, we list parking policies. Well, this could include an evaluation of various parking policies ranging from potential modification to some of the existing policies that we already have, like our residential parking permit districts or our residential pay by phone options. Or we could look at the introduction of potential new policies like resident only parking. Some of the other neighborhood protection topics include traffic management, traffic calming, and transportation demand management, or TDM. And TDM really focuses on encouraging alternative modes of transportation beyond just driving alone. So with the goal of this is really reducing car trips on the street. So in this category, we could explore things like incentives for event attendees to choose transit or shuttles or some other way of getting to the site other than driving. And as the plan unfolds, more specific topics within each of these theme areas would be identified. So under the transit topic, we know that we'll need to consider things like bus routes, bus stop locations, and service levels. And expanded bus rapid transit has been a goal of the city for many years now, and that does not go away with this plan. The design of Metroway is certainly a topic that we would need to consider with the project team. Smart mobility, to me, this is one of the most interesting topics to explore because technology is changing so quickly, and the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus at Potomac Yard creates this ideal location for kind of harnessing this cutting edge technology to manage traffic effectively. The city's actually already partnered with Virginia Tech and is currently testing smart signals in this specific neighborhood right now. Smarter traffic signals and predictive analytics are going to help optimize traffic flow for both event and non-event days and react in real time to traffic. So the city's really been taking a proactive approach to connect our traffic signals with fiber. And because we've been working on this for a long time, it enables us to embrace new technologies that really enhance our ability to kind of intelligently and dynamically manage our traffic, which is something we think could be really important and crucial for this site. And then with the technology space advancing so quickly, I think we as transportation planners, we've been challenging ourselves to think about what this neighborhood can be like in 4 years. So not picturing how it would function today if we just kind of dropped an arena from the sky. We want to think about how much the information we all have in our hands right now and the way that we work has changed over the past 4 years. So the information we have at our fingertips right now enables us to make these decisions about how and when we make trips, which days we might work from home or go into the office or take the metro to avoid DC rush hour traffic. And that's why smart mobility is going to be a really key kind of pillar of this plan. And then lastly, our fourth theme is roadway infrastructure. And so you heard Nick and Kathy talk about a lot of infrastructure, but as Ryan outlined, many of the changes to our streets are going to be informed by this development traffic study. And so the state's regional analysis provided us with a really valuable information and kind of pinpointing these key locations where we need to really focus and consider some changes. Over the years, staff has really, we've actively collaborated with our community through various planning initiatives, such as like our small area plans, our visioning, and our project design. And that practice is going to continue throughout this process. And if the proposal advances. And I think North Potomac Yard area will, regardless of what happens, it's going to be crafted to be this high quality. It's going to have high quality streetscapes, safe pedestrian crossings and sidewalks, and a network of interconnected and safe bicycle infrastructure. That's always been the goal for this area. Our community generally values multimodal transportation network, and the current North Potomac Yard small area plan really aims to kind of transform this area from a shopping center into a neighborhood with a lot of safe mobility options. And so we certainly acknowledge the necessity for infrastructure projects that are supporting vehicular travel. We're still committed to designing complete streets that cater to the diverse needs of our community. And however, kind of the specifics of these corridor and intersection projects are going to be refined a lot further as we have more information from our development traffic study. Next slide. So again, we're really in the very, very early stages of kind of shaping ideas to include in this plan. And as I previously mentioned, our initial pool of ideas draws from best practices, kind of insights from the state's transportation study, and feedback that we've been gathering, listening to you all from the community listening sessions and town halls and the online interactions that we've been having. And so you all can certainly expect more of these engagement sessions if the proposal moves forward. And we definitely encourage everyone to contribute their ideas. Every comment and email is being documented. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts through the project website. We'll be seeking input on innovative ideas and things that we want to be considering as we develop this plan further. So if the project moves forward, we've kind of outlined a really tentative timeline for the community transportation plan. Our objective would be to gather input on ideas and compile a comprehensive list for refinement. And then by June, insights from the traffic study would kind of help us hone in on key infrastructure projects. And ideally, we'd have a pretty well-defined list of components to include in the plan at that time. And of course, there'll be opportunities along the way for the community to provide input on the plan throughout the entire process. And then throughout the summer and fall, we would conduct background work, gather information, and really figure out which ideas are worth pursuing. Establishing a timeline early is going to be really crucial, considering that some of these components, like some of the bigger roadway infrastructure projects, are going to have a much longer lead time than other things, like kind of figuring out what should our transit schedules be. But by early 2025, we would hope to have some draft recommendations and kind of a preliminary implementation timelines to think through and work through with this project. So really recognizing that the arena is not going to materialize overnight, we believe we have time to thoughtfully consider policies and projects that safeguard our existing neighborhoods and ensure that any new development is well planned and reflects the community input and consideration that's inherent in our current development process. So thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight, and we look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you very much, Hillary. Now we will go to the audience for questions. We have a few people queued up. I am going to name them now. We have Catherine McAdoo. Catherine, you will be first. Make sure you give our team permission to unmute your mic. Followed by Catherine, we will have Rick Cooper, and then James Menslaka. I hope I'm not butchering your last name. I do apologize in advance. So that's Catherine, Rick, and James. You will be up now. So if we can unmute Catherine's mic, please. Catherine, you have 30 seconds exactly to ask your question. I will leave it to the panelists to chime in based on her question.
Thank you for taking my question. Who will ultimately be responsible for managing the traffic going in and out of the arena? And who will pay for those costs and oversee the implementation and operation?
So Captain, this is Nick Donahue. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the question. I'm going to start with the second half of your question first. So I think ultimately in who is responsible for the delivery and implementation of those projects, it is going to be a joint partnership between the state, the city, the county, and WMATA. So as Ms. McGee kind of outlined, there are some improvements at the WMATA station that are necessary, along with additional trains that would need to operate post-game and potentially pre-game as well. There are planned or potential improvements to Alexandria city streets that would involve the city working with the state. And then there are also improvements to several state roads in Arlington County, where the state would need to coordinate with Arlington County on those. As I mentioned earlier, it is our intent to specifically lay out who is responsible for each project in the memorandum of agreement that we hope to execute in the, sometime here in the spring or so this year. That would say, this project is a WMATA project, this project is an Alexandria project, this project is a state project, and here are the people that are responsible for it, and outlining it there. In terms of kind of the traffic to the arena, what the state has undertaken with this analysis, I think is a large portion of that question. I think that the city staff have outlined some work they're going to do that's also going to get to some of those other areas. So the state's analysis, again, is focused on some of the larger roadways and how can we mitigate any impacts from the, increased peak period traffic due to the change in plan development because of the arena compared to the small area plan. And then obviously, as the city talked about, they're going to do their development review process. I don't want to get into that and speak for them there, but that is kind of how those projects would be moved forward. So just to give you like an example of that, in the Amazon HQ2 process, one of the projects was the second Crystal City Metro entrance. Ultimately, Arlington County, under the MOA, was responsible for the delivery of that project, and they've been moving forward with the construction there through a PPEA, to deliver that project. Similarly, the county is moving forward with the DC to RVA kind of pedestrian connector between Crystal City and National Airport. And so there are going to be different parties who are responsible for that delivery. Ultimately, we are all responsible for demonstrating to you all and others where all this funding is going to come from and ensuring that there is the funding there that's necessary to be able to advance these projects. And I don't know if anyone from the city wants to get into any of your development review or other items.
For the sake of time, I will go to the next question. Rick Cooper. Rick Cooper, you are up next. While we are unmuting your mic, I will let James Maslakan know that he will follow Nick, followed by Matthew Youngblood, Deborah Hinkle, and Jonathan Kroll. We will be in touch behind the scenes. Rick, you're up.
Okay, I understand that you do anticipate event traffic taking Slater's Lane to head north to the site. Do you anticipate that this traffic will use Powhatan Street to get from the Parkway to Slater's Lane? How many vehicles do you anticipate? And where can we find the details of this planned improvement and its impact on Northeast Alexandria?
You're on mute, Nick.
Thank you, Ebony. You can always hear yourself. Rick, thank you again for the question there. I just want to answer the last part of your question first and then kick it over to Kathy McGee, who may answer that or hand it off to others. Again, I think right now I want to stress for all these improvements, these are planning level kind of concepts. They will be refined as things move forward through the public engagement process and other things. So I just want to really stress that at this time, we are looking at like what are turning volumes, what are through movements, and what are modifications that would be necessary to an intersection to be able to kind of achieve the travel times and offset any of the impact from that increased level of traffic there. And so I'm just trying to stress that everything we talk about tonight will be enhanced and modified and refined through that public involvement and engagement process. Kathy, I'll kick it over to you for kind of the remainder of Rick's questions.
Thank you. So I appreciate Nick's intro because I was going to definitely start with the fact that, you know, we are not at the improvement design level at this point. We just recognize that that intersection of Slater's Lane and Route 1 will need some attention. And so we have called that out and reserved funds to make some improvements there. As you know, since you live in the area, you know, traffic can't turn from the GW Parkway straight onto Slater's Lane. So they will make their way up, I believe it's Abingdon, I believe that's correct, to Slater's Lane and across Slater's, then to straight across the GW Parkway onto Slater's. That it is 5% of the overall vehicular traffic coming to the arena. And I can't do that math in my head. If one of my colleagues has a calculator handy and wants to do the math on that, in terms of exactly how many vehicles that is during that PM peak period. But it is assumed to be today 5% of the total vehicular traffic to the arena.
Thank you for that, James. And I am going to go to, no, James is next. James Manslaka, you are next. I apologize.
Hi, I'd like to ask a two-part question. One is I'd like to find out exactly how you developed your mode splits for both the pedestrian and the bike access to the arena. And secondly, I would also like to find out how what is the proposal for who will wind up funding the additional operating costs that will be necessary for transit after the arena is completed. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's me for the first question. So in terms of mode split for the small area plan included details on mode split that we incorporated into the analysis of that development. The mode split for the arena is a combination of that mode split in the small area plan for the rest of the development, and then some mode split information that was gathered from the existing arena, peer arenas, and conversations with the developer. And so that's sort of how that came out. I'd like to point out that there is assumptions around internal capture, which means other activities on the site will actually be the first spot people go, and then they'll travel to the arena walking or by transit. So let's imagine someone decides to go to dinner in Crystal City, and then they walk to the arena from there. So their trip would be counted much earlier, pre-dinner, and then they would be counted as a pedestrian trip to the arena. Likewise, if they're staying in the hotel on site, they would be counted as a pedestrian trip to the arena. If they're coming out of one of the nearby neighborhoods by bike, they would be counted as a bike trip. So that's where the assumptions around mode split come. And I hope that answered your first question. Your second question, I don't know if that's a Nick or a Jen question. It's a Nick question.
Great. Well, again, thank you for the question. As I said, on the operating side, we do anticipate that those costs will be between $2.5 and $7.5 million a year. That is something that the Commonwealth is actively working with its partners on this project to identify where those funds would come from. I do again expect that the source of that funding would be identified in the memorandum of agreement and other agreements that are enacted between the state, the city, the county, and the other parties here, the developer. It is important to identify. We understand it has a cost, so we understand that cost has to be paid for. Tonight, I cannot tell you the specific source of where those funds will come from, other than to say that, the Commonwealth has a, transportation budget, our partners have a transportation budget, and we understand that this service is key and necessary for addressing the impacts of the development. And so we're working to find the sources.
Thank you for that response and that question. I want to make sure Matthew Youngblood, has he left the chat? I want to make sure we had him in queue, but he is no longer on. Matthew? Okay, sounds good. I believe Deborah Hinkle is next. Deborah?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to know, how will the Amazon plans for Route 1 align with the Potomac Yard plans? Thank you very much.
No, Deborah, thanks for your question. And that is something that we looked at in the traffic analysis. And so there are two versions that are posted to the AXL Monumental website. There is kind of the shorter summary version and then a longer version that came from Kimley Horn. In that analysis, one of the things that was examined were the travel times southbound and northbound on coming on Route 1 from 395 to the site, both with and without the proposed urban boulevard project that is a part of the Amazon HQ2 commitments that were made. I'm focusing on the urban boulevard. There are 5 projects that were part of that. 4 of those are either open or kind of moving forward in construction. So the only one that's in kind of a not advancing actively at the moment is the Route 1 project. And so that's why I'm kind of focusing on that one. And when we looked at the impact of having versus not having the urban boulevard, we found that the arena project and the Route 1 urban boulevard project were fully compatible. The travel times were substantially the same, both with and without the urban boulevard. I've received a lot of questions from your legislators and other folks saying, well, like, Nick, how can that be? Like, how can the travel times kind of be the same if we're, taking a road that's kind of a freeway there for a little, less than a mile or so coming off of 395, heading into Crystal City, and we're going to add traffic lights to it. And the reason the travel times are substantially the same is because there's already traffic lights essentially between on Route 1 between Crystal City and the site here. And so what the Urban Boulevard project would do is add 2 to 3 additional stoplights along that corridor. And so one of the key things that we were examining in our analysis is whether or not that had any impact with traffic backing up onto Interstate 395 for people coming south and taking that kind of ramp that goes up and over and then into Crystal City. And the good news is we found there were not impacts back to the mainline interstate from that there. And so this project should have no impact one way or the other on the Route 1, urban boulevard project that's a part of the Amazon HQ2 commitments.
Jonathan Krall, you are up next. Jonathan Krall, and let me just go ahead and put the others on notice. Jonathan Krall, Ben G, Gabrielle Maury, Elena Hutchinson.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm hearing an awful lot about traffic, and I realize car-dependent people get very frustrated and very loud, but our elections show that people actually vote for transit, and the car people, they don't win elections. We've seen it in our local election where the champion of the anti-bike lane champion from Seminary Road came in 10th in the election. And so can you please center people instead of cars? What fills up the arena is people, not cars. And can we not please spend any more money enabling more cars to come to Alexandria? Because first, you can't fix traffic. You always promise you can fix traffic, but you can't. And second, more cars degrade their quality of life. So please spend the money on transit. So can we please use the number of people as the metric? Thank you very much.
So Jonathan, thank you for the kind of the question and statement there. I'll let Ginger Brule just hit a little bit on maybe some of the transit analysis and improvements that are contemplated in here. And I just want to stress, like, we believe a 50% non-auto mode share is achievable, and we want to try and actually hit a higher share there. Like, right, we ultimately want to make it as, convenient for people to get to the arena there. So I understand a lot of the kind of points and perspectives you were raising, but I'll let Jen kind of talk through some of the specific transit improvements, maybe in a little bit more detail than we did previously, to make sure that folks have clarity that there are a number of important transit enhancements that are a part of this proposal of improvements.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. We're fortunate in that area that we've already got a lot of transit infrastructure in place. You've got the brand new Potomac Yard Metro Rail Station that opened less than a year ago. You have the Metroway Bus Rapid Transit System, which was the first bus rapid transit system in the Commonwealth. Dash Bus, which is one of the most productive local bus services in the Commonwealth. So we have a very transit-rich environment. And when we did the analysis in the study, we really focused on how we could lean into those assets and move more people and focus more on moving people than on moving cars to get them to the site, and looked at how we could do that through some targeted investments in both service, and that is by looking at layering in additional rail service around the peak event time. So running some additional trains so that there would be more frequency through the station, and then looking at what types of modifications could be made to the Potomac Yard station to help make those people flow through that station more easily and make the metro even more accessible to folks attending events at the station. But we didn't just stop with Metro. I mean, obviously Metro Rail is an incredible asset for the site, but also with Metroway, we looked at additional frequency. We looked at additional frequency on Dash Bus routes as well, and feel confident that we can achieve that 50% mode split, and with good, efficient, effective service and making it very attractive. I think it could be higher than that. I will add that the Commonwealth really has transformational levels of investment in the rail corridor that also runs adjacent to the site. And while we did not look specifically at VRE in this particular analysis, because we have a number of projects that are underway that won't be completed until 2030 with the construction of a new long bridge, a fourth track through Alexandria, really opening up passenger rail, both Amtrak and VRE into the future. There are a lot of opportunities beyond the study window that we looked at in this very high level analysis, where we can focus on just what you said, moving more people, focusing on moving people, getting them where they need to go with rail, in addition to the transit alternatives that are already considered in the study. So thanks for your question, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. Benji is up next, followed by Gabriel, Elena, and Catherine Murphy. Benji? Make sure you give our team the permission to unmute you. Gonna wait a couple of other seconds, 5 seconds, and then we will try to get you back in the queue, Benji. Do we have permission? Let's go to Gabriel Maury. Gabriel Maury, Benji will try to get you back on shortly.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I can see that. Perfect. I am a transit planner with 8 years of experience both in Alexandria and the DC area. Thank you all so much for the wonderful plans you put together for this. 2 questions. One, in my experience, widening intersections always makes a worse environment for pedestrians. So how can we square this with our city's commitment to Vision Zero in walkable cities? And then second, if the plan calls for a 50-50 mode split between transit and cars, why do cars get 2 times as much funding? Does that mean that we can aim for a higher mode split? Also fully support what Mr. Kroll said earlier. Thank you. Bye.
Well, thank you, Gabriel, for your question, and thank you again for taking the time this evening to come with us and ask these questions. I think on your first one, I think we are all committed to having a safe environment for all users of the roadway. A lot of the issues I think that you're raising are things that will need to be dealt with during the specific design of each of these improvements as they go forward there. Pedestrian safety is a very important issue, and it's particularly important in areas like Alexandria, Route 1, Crystal City, there. And so we do take that issue seriously. I hope you don't take my answers by not telling you exactly how we'll do it as some sort of pass on this question. What I'm really trying to convey to you is we understand the importance, and as the projects go through the specific design process, that is going to have to be a key part of what we look at to make sure that we are creating kind of the neighborhoods and the level of comfort that is necessary for people to safely walk and bike in this neighborhood and to the proposed development. So I hope you understand what I'm saying there, and I know it doesn't exactly tell you this is what we're going to do to answer it, but we understand it's important, and it's something that is going to have to be looked at and considered as the engineers kind of move forward with some of that work. And there's a lot of comments and conversation that VDOT had with folks as it worked on the Route 1 Urban Boulevard. I hope folks saw flexibility and give and take from the department on that, and I would hope that we would follow a similar approach on any of these improvements that we look on the other parts of the Route 1 kind of corridor there. And then in terms of like the amount of funding, I think it's important to keep in mind the perspective that a $370 million metro rail station just opened here at Potomac Yard, which is a key part of why we're actually, talking about this development. It was core to the small area plan. And so in my mind, when you think about like funding in this area, like that would be a really important thing to consider there. And if you do that, I think you'll kind of see some differences there in kind of the road versus transit totals that have taken place. Because if that metro rail station wasn't there, that would need to be a part of this proposal, and that would be, a $370 million cost to be able to advance that there. And so I think one of the reasons you see those lower transit costs in these kind of current capital allocations, again, not taking into account the operating, which does balance that out to an extent, is that there was already a very, very substantial and significant investment made in transit, both in the metro rail station by the Commonwealth and the city, but then also in the expansion of the Metroway, which was funded, the initial Metroway, which was funded through the US DOT grant back in the 2010, 2012 timeframe, and opened, a few years after that, but also the expansion that is being funded as a part of the Amazon HQ2 kind of commitments and will be moving forward in the next few years. And so there's a number of investments there. I don't think we should look at just this package of improvements in isolation without taking into account some of the other improvements that have been funded and made in the area there. Again, ultimately, I hope folks see that we believe that a multimodal transportation solution is necessary to be able to serve the needs of this community and the proposed development.
Thank you. Elena Hutchinson, Catherine Murphy, you are next. So Elena Hutchinson and then Catherine Murphy.
Hi there. I personally think there are some limitations to the Kimley-Horn study that we've had access to, namely that it's benchmarking everything against kind of a hypothetical built out to SUP Potomac Yard rather than just using today. And also that it's using the same mode share at 50% that we see in Gallery Place for a location that's really not quite as central. I'm curious if anyone can comment on why those two decisions were made, as well as whether there are any opportunities going forward to either revisit those model decisions in the Kimley-Horn study or when we move forward with an Alexandria study. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Elena, and thanks for the question. So just starting with your kind of first question first is, again, there's going to be no arena next year. There's going to be no games next year. That is going to be something that will happen in the future. And so the state made the decision in its analysis, as is traditional and typical for kind of traffic impact analysis, to look at what is the locally approved plan for growth for the area and what are the differences in impact from any change in that, and how can we address those changes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the city of Alexandria, through its development approval process and comprehensive planning process, updated and added the small area plan to its comprehensive plan, and that was the basis of the Commonwealth partnering with the city on the large metro rail station investment and other things in that area. And we as the state, did not think it was appropriate for us to assume different land uses in the future than that which the local community has adopted through their legislative process on the council as the growth that they hope to see kind of in an area. And actually, if you wanted to jump in, I saw you go off mute there. My apologies.
No, thank you, Nick, for that. I think we just wanted to reiterate what you're saying. And Ryan is also trying to step in and kind of mention the whole thing about once we were at a point that we're going to be able to review this this proposal, through our processes, I think we're gonna have an opportunity to identify, additional, questions that the public is asking. So Ryan, I mean, I think that you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate what Nick was talking about, when thinking about future development. So whenever we look at impacts that a development has on the network, we want to compare apples to apples. So we want to make sure that there's not really a much of a change other than the development. So if we're comparing it to today's standards, then the development gets built in the future, then there's a lot of changes that could happen. There's other improvements, there's population growth, there's things of that nature. So industry practice usually typically compares it to the future conditions without the development and with the development. That's how we get a kind of robust understanding of the impacts to the network. And then as Nick kind of alluded to as well, and also Adriana, we do have a process in place, the site plan review process, where we could revisit the mode split and things of that nature. We're looking at it at more detailed and more understanding. And that's probably where we would kind of have a determination as to if the mode split is assumed in the regional study is the best way to go. So again, those more technical details will come at a later stage and through the site plan review process.
Thanks. And then I know the question was asked about the mode split, and I'd love just to give Aaron with Kimley Horn a quick opportunity to just talk a little bit more about some of the analysis that they did to kind of also complement and come up with some of that mode split information. So Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I apologize for my voice. I'm recovering from having lost it earlier this week, but wanted to make sure we were here to be able to answer questions. So we did pull the existing mode split, like you mentioned, Elena, but we also looked at mode splits for other arenas across the country as part of our high-level analysis, the research that we did. One specific example, and you'll see it in the slides that are available on Alexandria's website, was the Chase Center out in San Francisco. It's a similar sized arena. Interestingly enough, it is also located with one boundary that is water. So it has water on the east side as well. So they're limited in how people are able to access their site. They actually have a transit mode split of 57%. Now, because we haven't gone through the detailed analysis like Ryan and Adriana were mentioning, there's the chance that the number could be different than the 50% that we assumed. We did do a high-level analysis of looking at, well, if it's 40%, what does that look like? If it's 60%, what does that look like? And we felt like 50% was a good middle ground, given where we were in the planning level analysis. So just wanted to provide that information as a little bit of background. It wasn't just based on the existing arena. We also looked at arenas across the country for that mode split assumption. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, everyone who answered. I have Catherine Murphy up next, followed by Kate Leach. Hope I pronounced your name right. Kathy Mattis will follow. Catherine, you're up.
Thank you. My question concerns when was the traffic study completed? So we recently received the economic impact report. So in the summary that was given with Kimley Horn and those 40 events overlapping rush hour traffic, were you given information from Monumental or from the economic impact that shows the 336 days of events that's going to be taking place? So which were you given access to that information? Does some of your traffic analysis incorporate what Monumental gave Alexandria an economic impact, or was this just completely done separate?
So Catherine, this is Nick. Thank you again, for taking the time this evening and your question. I'll start and then I'll, let others from the state team jump in as they see fit at the end of kind of my remarks. But I think there's been a lot of focus on the 40 games, and I just want to kind of own we probably could have done and should have done a better job explaining that. initially, we understand there are events on more days during the year than those 40 days. So like, I just want to say that out loud. We are aware of that, and we understand it's important that the transportation system, both transit and highway and, bike and ped, work on those other times as well. What we were trying to do in this study was look at a greatest kind of impact scenario. So a sold out game where the start time overlaps with a period of time where you're at the peak of rush hour, which is 5 to 6. And so our improvements and the analysis was all tailored on the idea of, if we can make it work then it should work for games that start at 7 o'clock on a Saturday. And it should work for games that start on 7 o'clock on a Friday or 2 p.m. on a Saturday and other things of that nature. I do think the analysis had more than 40 games and events. I had hundreds assumed there. I don't know the exact number. Someone else on the team might be able to provide that information there. But, it looks at all of the traffic, both, multimodal and roadway from the proposed development. So it's not just the arena. It also considers the Performing Arts Center, as well as the hotel and the other residential and retail development that is a part of the, phase one of that development there. But what we're really focused on this, and why Kathy kind of described this as like a conservative approach, which again means greatest impact, not least impact there. It's sometimes kind of the word feels backwards at times, is those are the times with the greatest impacts. And if we can make the transportation network work at that time of greatest impact, then it should work sufficiently at those other times as well. And so that was kind of the reason there. So we understand there are lots of events, both at the arena and the Performing Arts Center, that will take place. And, again, all of those things are considered in there. And so there are traffic impacts from all of those other uses there. But the focus on that 5 to 6 was really just trying to say, when there's the most background traffic on the network, and when the most traffic from the arena overlaps with that, what is going to happen? What do we think those impacts will be? And what steps do we believe are necessary to help address that and mitigate those impacts? And so that is, again, in a nutshell, what the analysis has looked at.
Thank you, Nick. Kate, you are up next. Before you begin, I just want to say we have about 20 minutes left for this Q&A. We will do our best to get as many questions in as possible. So Kate, you are next.
I just want to thank you all for taking live questions. My question or preface is, it is clear that the study was for a high-level view of vehicular traffic from I-395 to East Glebe, improvements to Route 1 and Slater's Lane from the GW Parkway, all that being part of the plan. My question is, at what time will a small view be made of both vehicular and pedestrian traffic related to cut-through residential routes like Powhatan, that was previously mentioned, through North Old Town and through the Delray neighborhood, specifically Windsor Avenue and East Custis Avenue, the Lynn Haven neighborhood, particularly Reed and Montrose, and other neighborhoods like Aurora Highlands, particularly Army Navy Drive and Arlington Ridge and 23rd Streets. Thank you.
So I can dive in on that one. So thanks for the question. Again, this was the state transportation study was a really high level study. And as we get more information with the more detailed traffic analysis, that's going to enable us to have a better picture of what's going to happen on our local streets. And we're going to have to make some assumptions about how people are going to move around and what routes they're going to take. But, we're also committed to working with communities and neighborhoods to look at ways to make sure that we're minimizing those impacts, whether it's traffic calming on neighborhood streets, whether it's looking at some of our policies around even looking at turn restrictions or some other things like that. That's what we would do through kind of our community transportation plan, is really those details of working with the specific neighborhoods about how we would mitigate some of the traffic impacts and additional trips. Because yes, most of the traffic is probably going to be on the larger roads, but we know that Waze and Google are going to route people wherever they want to go and through neighborhoods. And so that's something that we need to think about. And I think we'll have some time over the next couple of years to work with the communities and figure out what types of treatments we can put in to minimize the impact.
And I'll just add as well, it was mentioned some of the Arlington intersections as well, and some of the Arlington neighborhoods as well. I know it hasn't been stated today, but we are working closely with Arlington as well through this effort, ensuring that they're part of the process, ensuring that they know what's coming and what could be possibly done through this effort from a community engagement standpoint and from a transportation planning effort as well. So they're involved in this process. We've been in conversations with them. We're coordinating with each other, figuring out what are things that we could do and mitigation measures that we could do to protect the neighborhood as well. So just want to reiterate Arlington's part of this conversation as well. Although they're not here tonight, but we have been involved with them as well in this effort too.
Thank you. Kathy Mattis is up next. Kathy Mattis.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to go off script a little bit here because I want to follow up on my question from the question that was just asked and do dive in a little bit more into that lower level survey on the impact on neighborhoods. I live in Potomac Yards. I'm very close to the intersection of Potomac and Main Line. So what, if anything, can be done to mitigate traffic coming through Potomac Yards to make our lives a little bit more better if this plan does go through? Can we put signs like they have in Del Rey that say do not cut through and keep people on Route 1? I think Potomac Yard residents are really, really, really concerned about the impact to the traffic here and the quality of life. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, I would appreciate that.
Thanks, Kathy. And yeah, we understand the neighborhoods are very concerned about cut through traffic. It's something that, we experience in Alexandria, just being kind of located where we are outside of the district and in between two highways. We deal with that with a lot of our communities. And this is something that I think the city is committing to work with all the various communities to see what it is that we could do. And so we'll understand more when we have a more detailed and localized traffic study, but we'll also be working with communities on different options. And so, we don't have a lot of the answers that I think people are looking for tonight. That's something that's going to come as we continue to have conversations with the communities, looking at our toolbox of different mitigation measures, different options, and working through what's going to work best for each community to make sure that we're mitigating traffic impacts and that we're preserving, kind of quality of life for people, and that we're not having a lot of that cut through traffic in the neighborhood. That's something that's really important to, I think the city understands that is an important part of this process moving forward. And that's something that we would be doing over the next couple of years with these communities.
Thank you, Hillary. April, oh, I have a Peter who's queued up, Peter Lincoln, and then I would like to get to April. Peter?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
I first quickly want to thank all of you for your hard work on this endeavor. I also quickly want to say that there are a lot of us that don't share the anti-car animus that's been voiced here tonight. I want to go to Nick, and he's already acknowledged something about this, but I want to underscore some concern. I think you've talked about the state plan as being conservative, entailing planning level concepts and assumptions. I just want to express great concern. There was a slide that talked about 40 weekday home games. I think very quickly after that, someone noted that there are 19 on Fridays, which is another 50%. And if you have figured out that the plan with 40 home games works, I would suggest you go back and look at whether 59 games, actual weekdays, work. Related to that, I wish you had looked at not the 5 to 6 hour for rush hour, but a 5 to 7 hour. I hope those of you that are professional planners, including a neighbor that's on this call representing the city, I hope you're factoring in the prospect that there may be a growing back to office looming in coming years.
Thank you, Peter. I wanted to pitch it to the team. Nick, I think he did direct something to you.
He did. Well, Peter, again, thank you for coming this evening. And so I'll try and address kind of the 40 game issue again here. So Peter, what I want to say to you is we are confident that on those Friday games, there is that the impact will be less than they were seen in the modeling on those Monday through Thursday games. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through this because it's been a big part of the discussion. And I really want to try and, to the extent we can, clear this up or, hear additional questions to allow us to keep kind of the dialogue going on this topic. And so the exclusion of Friday was not done to understate the impacts. The reason Friday was not a part of the analysis is because I don't know if it's the regional travel model or just the background kind of traffic that we are using on Friday afternoons is lower than the traffic on the roadway that you would see on a Thursday, a Tuesday. And so on that Friday, say you have the home game, you still have 60% of the people who are coming to the arena by vehicle coming during that 5 to 6 hour. The number of people who are just otherwise on Route 1 at that time are less than the people who would be on Route 1 at that time on Thursday. And so we studied Thursday to again look at the greatest potential impact. Excluding Friday was not intended to understate it. Friday, we thought that because of the lower kind of baseline volumes on the network, the impacts would be less than what we would see Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday. My apologies there for that slip up. And so that is really what we are, just trying to look at there. And so I just want to be trying to keep making that point. That is, it is not intended to understate in any way, shape, or form those impacts. Similarly, on the 6 to 7 hour. Look, guys, I lived in the area for 10 years. I'm under no delusion that traffic magically goes away in Northern Virginia at 6 p.m. Like, it does not. Anyone who tells you that, they should stop telling you about traffic in the area. What we do think, though, about traffic from 6 to 7 is that there are less cars on the road in the kind of background there who are just otherwise on the road than there are from 5 to 6. Similarly, for a game with a start time of 7 p.m., we think the majority of those who are going to otherwise come by auto, this about 60% of them again, are going to come during that 5 to 6 hours. So that, again, is why we looked at 5 to 6. And so, again, just not using numbers because I'm bad at math. I know Kathy earlier talked about calculators. Like I'm just bad at math. That's a liability I've had my whole life. But if there's X number of cars like on the road during 5 to 6, there's point something X on the road from 6 to 7. So it's just less vehicles there. That's why that wasn't the main thing there. Similarly, instead of there being 60% of the traffic going to the arena, there's some other smaller percentage. And so that hour wasn't the focus of the analysis because we thought if we focused on that hour, we wouldn't be looking at the time of the greatest impacts. So we're really trying to make sure from the state kind of high level planning analysis that we are focusing on those times where there's the greatest amount of background traffic and traffic from the arena on the roadways. And if we can make the road work at that time, it should work at the 6 to 7 hour. It should work at 5 to 6 on Friday during a sold out home game, or similarly on the weekends during the afternoon games or evening games or things of that nature. And so that is kind of the intent of that. It is clear to me that we need to keep working on how we describe this. And also I'm happy to have more questions about it if what we're saying is still leaving folks with some kind of questions about what was this looked at or was that not looked at. But I want to be very clear. Our intent was not to understate anything. Our intent was actually to look at the areas of greatest impact and make sure that the transportation network could work at those times.
Thank you, Nick. We have time for one more question. That will be Brady Goldberg. But I have Jonathan Husky queued up.
Thank
Jonathan?
you. Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. I just want y'all to walk me through how likely it's going to be for someone to drive 30 to 40 minutes from downtown, from part of DC or parts west, park in a parking lot in Crystal City, walk out of that parking lot, either get onto the metro or get in a shuttle, and then stay in that shuttle, also be in traffic, and then walk to the arena and do that again. Like the commute here just seems awful. Have y'all factored in the will people do this, what we're asking them or projecting that they could do, rather than, you know, just the data itself?
So Jonathan, I will take a crack at kind of the question narrative that you put out there for us. And so again, what I would say is that we have looked at comparable arenas outside of the urban core in San Francisco and Portland and New York and DC, like with Audi Field and other things. And we have seen similar types of mode splits as to what we are, using in the analysis that we've seen here. The state, along with the city, the county, and the region have made significant investments in transit and other infrastructure in this area. The Metroway, the Potomac Yard Metro Rail Station. We're having an ongoing active discussion about, the WMATA operating funding needs. And so we are committed to providing a multimodal transportation system there. Do I expect every single person who might go to the game will find any given option convenient? Obviously, people have their own opinions and differences there. And so what is convenient and appealing for one may not be for another. And so let me just acknowledge that up front. And all the things we're talking about here, there will be people who will not want to avail themselves of that option. And that's okay. People have choices. Ultimately, Monumental believes that this site is viable and that their fans will continue to come to this area. We believe that the transportation improvements we have developed will create an opportunity for people to be able to get here through a variety of means. I was talking with a delegate the other day who said, well, I would never park at the Huntington Metro and ride there. And, that particular individual worked in the District of Columbia. And we don't expect someone who's working in the District of Columbia to drive past the arena to go to the Huntington Metro and park and take Metro back there. But there are people who work in Fairfax County and live in Fairfax County or in other areas there who that might actually be a convenient option for. And so there's going to be different options that work better for some folks and don't work as well for other folks. Ultimately, what we are trying to do is provide a multitude of different types of improvements that will allow the system as a whole to kind of function and create, multiple travel options for people to reach this development and the arena, and hopefully make it a success.
Thank you, Nick. I do want to get back to Brady. He will be the final question. Brady?
Thank you. I think I'll defer my questions because basically what I've heard is that the arena is coming and I'm not unequivocally opposed to it, and that Monument is absorbing none or very little of the initial infrastructure cost, nor the upkeep of the cost. So thank you for your time, and I'm anxious to see what the future brings.
Thank you, Brady. With 2 minutes left, or less than 2 minutes, I wanted to thank everyone for attending this evening. I wanted to thank our panelists. For those of you who have submitted questions, we will be answering them online. So please look for it on monumentalalx.com as well as the city's page. We have it on a tile on our homepage. You can see everything that's happening and everything that's upcoming. I do want you all to know that this is the first of our community conversation series. It is with the intent to be more transparent, have more dialogue with our community. So hopefully this went over well with all of you, and we look forward to another community conversation in the coming days. We have other engagements. We have a public hearing this Saturday, as well as pop-up scheduled. We have many opportunities to engage our experts as well as us hearing your voices. So thank you again very much and have a good evening.